Brought to you by JMR Rentals, jmrny.com. Now you can support No Rest for the Weekend by clicking the link in the description. Your donation will help us create more great content each week. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for your support. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend. I'm Jason Godbey, and today on the program, we're talking about the new feature documentary, The First Step. The film follows media personality / activist Van Jones as he attempts to get a prison reform bill passed during the Trump era. To help get his point across, Jones assembles a group of people from Los Angeles and West Virginia, the goal being to bring them together and take them to Washington to be heard. Jones has been considered a polarizing figure by some because of his attempts to reach across the aisle and work with conservatives. The film has a lot of interesting twists and turns. Jones has to deal with opposition from both the left and the right, all the while trying to keep his eyes on the goal of bringing reform to the prison system. I caught up with the filmmakers just before the film was to be released in select theaters earlier this year. Here's my interview with Brandon and Lance Kramer. Welcome, guys.
Good to be with you, Jason. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having us here.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me as part of your junket. I appreciate it. I saw the film. I liked it a lot. I have a lot of questions. I probably don't have enough time to ask them all, so I want to get right to it. What I'm curious about with the film is, how did it come about? Like, how did you guys get this together? Did you guys know Van Jones, or were you like friends, or what was the genesis of it?
Yeah, we knew Van for several years before any shooting happened. We'd worked with Van on two separate projects before, and the 2016 election happened. Trump was elected, as we all know, and Lance and I sat down with Van and asked him, what did the next 4 years look like for you in this moment? And he basically told Lance and I that he knew that a lot of his peers, other civil rights leaders, were going to be fighting this administration and Republicans in power and resisting. And that was really important. And he felt like somebody needed to be an advocate on these issues like criminal justice reform and the addiction crisis in a way that was working toward engagement and crossing the aisle and seeing, is there any sliver of hope that something meaningful could get accomplished during these 4 years with Trump in power? And as documentary filmmakers who care a lot about the growing divide in this country and are really concerned with it, we felt like telling a story about a bridge builder, one of the few during that era, would be a really important historical document. At that time, Van did not know Jared Kushner. There was no First Step Act bill. It was just a progressive leader with a mission to work across the aisle. And we had a sense that would be a very difficult, painful journey for Van and his team, given the forces of polarization in this country, and that proved to be correct. And that set out a 5-year journey of telling this story of bridge building.
The process was 5 years that you guys were on the journey with him?
We filmed for about 3.5 years. About 400 hours of footage following this story. And then the edit took 2 years to put it together. As you see in the film, it's an extremely complicated story, representing, it's not just Van's story, there's activists on both sides of the aisle. It's also taking a story of how a bill becomes law, which sounds like a dry thing, but in reality, it's a messy, conflict-ridden human journey, and how to make that clear for audiences. That took a while to both get access to filming behind the scenes and behind closed doors with all these elected officials, and then it took a lot of time to put it together into an edit.
When did you guys know it was a movie? Like, when was there a particular moment when you were like, you can follow a guy around with a camera and get a lot of boring stuff. It's not, especially documentaries now, old-fashioned documentaries that are on PBS years ago, they were kind of allowed to be boring. But now you're, competing with Transformers movies and stuff like that. You guys got to make entertainment. When did you know that it was going to be an entertaining documentary?
I can say the moment I knew, which is not a scene that's in the film, but it was the moment where I knew it was a movie, was the day after the attack in Charlottesville. I had been filming with Van for several months, and Van was on stages giving speeches about bipartisanship and bridge building. And I was knocking my head against the wall saying, his ideas are amazing and really interesting and dynamic, but somebody on a stage giving speeches is not a movie. And then the attack in Charlottesville happened, and I was with Van, and his phone blew up, and he was all of a sudden on calls with civil rights leaders trying to figure out how, collectively they could respond in the midst of this crisis that was only furthering the divide in this country. The reason why I knew it was a movie was because, first of all, I'm intimate with this civil rights leader in a moment of national crisis. And then on top of that, he's pursuing a path of bridge building and trying to heal the divide of the country in a moment when the wounds and the divisions became ripped open and went further. And that was the clear moment that his mission was going to experience enormous adversity and challenges and roadblocks. And that's what a great film is. It's somebody on a quest facing enormous odds.
Van Jones is a bit of a polarizing figure. And this is not a political show, and I don't do a lot of political stuff on it. But every once in a while, somebody comes out with a political movie, so it makes it relevant to talk about the politics of things. He's doing something, he's trying to pass a bill on prison reform during the Trump administration. It seems like a Sisyphean effort to begin with. Then you got characters in this movie like, Jared Kushner, and you've got these people on the right, and then you've got like Kim Kardashian walking into the movie. Like, it sounds bizarre in a way, but did you ever feel like by attaching yourself to this guy, I know you knew him, but make it sort of, I don't want to say you were creating a piece of propaganda for him, but like by making this piece with him, did you ever worry about your own reputations or think that there's going to be some people on my side of the aisle that are not going to like me very much because of this guy and how he's tried to build a bridge to, make a deal with the devil, it seems like in some ways?
It's a great question. I think, let me put it this way. Brandon and I have some really excellent mentors that have guided us since we started making films. And there's many tenets from their playbook that we've really adopted closely. One of them that's very central to us is to not look down the nose of protagonists of a film. And at the end of the day, it takes such a leap of faith and courage and trust for someone to bring you into their life in the way that we make films. And you have to, on some basic level, care about the people that you're making a film about. And, we don't make gotcha films. We're not trying to take anyone down in our films, even though they deal with really hard stuff. I think we have care for all the protagonists who are in this film, and Van included. That didn't mean that we weren't going to shine a really honest light on the hard things that he was going through. We felt that was really critical to the storytelling. But at the end of the day, we had to care about the people who were in the film. And if that meant that someone was going to have adverse feelings towards us because we were telling this kind of story, I think that was something we had to just come to terms with. And I think our integrity was on the line, or our reputation was on the line, in a sense, not just making a film that had Van as a protagonist, but the film where we went into the Trump White House, and a film that we had conservatives from rural West Virginia as represented empathetically, and and all these different points of view were represented, I hope, with some degree of nuance and and empathy. And so holding all of that was, I suppose you could say, a risk, but it was certainly a risk that we felt was really important to take. And we just felt it was a big responsibility to represent people in the ways that they would want to be seen and in a way that viewers could trust. And I'm not going to pretend that that's been easy then to make a film like that launch into the world. The platforms that exist don't easily kind of take on storytelling like that. So that was also a risk to us too, is to figure out how do you take a story like this into the world, a world that's not really built for it. But we felt that that was, as much as that was baked into the storytelling, it was also the broader project of the film was to do this kind of work.
I mean, I assume that you guys have seen the movie screened, and you showed it to the people who are in it. And you're right, you do have, you've got the LA folks in there as well as people from West Virginia. So you're already, bridging gaps and things like that. And I think there's some really beautiful stuff in the movie between when you see those two people just communicating. And I think you guys also do a good job of getting out of the way. And was it kind of a decision that you guys were going to not impose your will on the film? I mean, I know that there's definitely a point of view, but it doesn't feel like it's a heavy-handed, we want you to think this way kind of thing, which I think a lot of docs are right now. Was that something you did from the get-go?
Yeah, I mean, we were raised into the documentary school of thought that our mentors at Cartemquin Films have sort of trained us in, which is that documentary filmmaking is basically research. You don't set out, or we don't set out with a specific agenda item to push. What we set out with is questions. And you're constantly, we're like, what does it look like to bridge these divides? What does it look like to pass legislation? How does this impact these people's lives? And you kind of you follow the story where it unfolds. You make sure that each person's point of view is clear. And you have to constantly check yourself. And when the story you're hoping the story is going to go this way, you think it is, and then it goes in a different direction. Or somebody that and it's like Van went on CPAC at the end of the film, like he speaks at CPAC, and so the bill had just passed. Thousands of people are coming home from prison. We're thinking the movie's over. Then Van goes to CPAC and says some remarks about the Republican Party doing an amazing job on criminal justice reform. Those comments got him in a lot of trouble from the left. And then the 5 LA activists that are featured in the film, they wanted to have a conversation with Van and tell him how much that hurt for them. So then you're like, okay, well, we thought we had a victory as the ending. That's still a victory, but this is part of the story too. And so the ending is a much more complicated ending, not because there's a lot of ways to maybe make a film. If it was just trying to advocate for Van's point of view, for Van's strategy in this position, you wouldn't include a whole aftermath of the film that shows, that even though the people have come home, it's caused some ruptures within the progressive community. We felt it was really important to show that complexity because it's real. And at the end of the day, the only reason to make a documentary, or not the only reason, the reason we make documentaries is because we actually want to solve some of these entrenched, complicated problems. And what we've found is when we show the film, the lights come up after the screenings, in particular in theaters, and you've got progressives in the audience, you've got conservatives, you got people in the middle, and people walk out into some of these receptions and they work it out. They're like talking about it, they're wrestling with it. And that's the beauty of cinema. And it's the beauty of what we're about to do and taking this film to theaters all around the country.
Where do you guys see this ending up ultimately? Do you want to see this on like a Netflix or a streaming provider? Where do you think people will find this?
Yeah, we're gonna make some announcements in probably the next month or so. So ultimately, we want to see it as broadly accessible as possible. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, it's like we want the film to be available for people to see, far and wide. That's the hope, is that you don't have to go through too many barriers to access the film. So that's whether you're at home or also just in other spaces like in prisons. We've been doing screenings in prisons, done a number of pilot screenings. We're trying to work through some structural barriers you can imagine to just make the film more accessible in spaces with people who are directly impacted as well. So it's like just trying to navigate all these different things, that some of which are very, very obvious structural barriers, and then others are just trying to find the right home and platform that is not seeking to be divisive by nature. These are things that are really difficult to navigate in this environment. But the hope is that, or the plan and the hope has always been, that we could use these in-person theatrical experiences and otherwise to almost demonstrate what's possible, and to give as many people as we could physically offer a chance to be in the room, like what Brandon was saying, and then ultimately, be able to take that at home. So we're figuring out the streaming part, and should be like really close to making some announcements pretty soon.
You should put this movie right out at Thanksgiving, and people watch it, while they're eating dinner. Cause a few fist fights, things like that. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But I think you guys did a hell of a job with a tough subject. And do you guys have another doc on the way? Are you guys gonna make a doc series? They seem to be really popular right now. Feel free to break news and make announcements right now. This will air probably in March.
What I'll say is, Lance and I, we're doc filmmakers at heart. We'll always be doc filmmakers and want to, and continue to, produce meaningful documentary stories. We're right now, after making, what's been 13 plus years of social and political documentaries like The First Step, we're both just really have been craving telling stories that are really like deeply personal and close to home and close to lived experiences and family stories and things like that. And so Lance and I have been developing a few different scripted projects. We love docs, but we also love narrative films. And there's been a few experiences that we've had that in our own lives that is in the past that we're really interested in sort of recreating on the big screen. So the next project will likely be a scripted film, which I can't announce right now, but in the next, it's going to be a few years off, but stay tuned for that.
So for people who want to know more about the film, where can they find information about you guys and the movie online?
You can go to thefirststep.com or firststepfilm.com for the website list of all the screenings. There's 25 cities that are going to be featuring the film. That'll probably grow to about 30 by the time everything is programmed. Follow us on First Step Movie, First Step Film on social media. And Brandon and I are also both on social media ourselves. Follow us. We post and try to talk from a more personal perspective also about our processing experiences as filmmakers. And if you're interested in the work of the organizations in the film too, it's dream.org and also Reform Alliance. And there's a bunch of different grassroots groups as well that you can go on the website and learn more about.
Great. Well, that's my time, guys. Thanks so much for this. This was great. Like I said, I really enjoyed the film, and hopefully, we've put out the press release, so help get the word out. And good luck with the screenings, and good luck with the next steps. And of course, you're welcome to come back with your next project.
Would love to. Thank you so much for having us. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason.
And that's all we got for you today. Thanks so much for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including our movie reviews, visit our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, youtube.com/getbehindtherabbit. Once again, I'd like to thank my guests, Brandon Kramer and Lance Kramer, and our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.